Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
This is our YouTube channel. We're glad you're here. Subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like.
Yep. Check out the podcast. Guy, me, I'm John. Haberman Middlecoff. It's our last names below in the description. Go check it out right now.
Yeah. Sometimes people get confused because on the YouTubes, I sit on the right of the video, but my name is on the left. You know, we mix it up. Now today I'm wearing the same color as your shirt. My shirt is the same color as your name. So we just like to make everyone's brains work. You know, we don't want to make it easy.
Figure it out, people.
All right, John. Noted Padres homer Daniel Jeremiah updated his top 50 on NFL.com, prospects 2.0, and we went through them. We love looking at this stuff, and a lot has gone unchanged. Like DJ had Justin Fields 12th on his 1.0. He's got him 12th on his 2.0. He had Trey Lance 11th on his 1.0. He has him 11th on his 2.0. So guys are not flying all over the board. This is him watching Senior Bowl stuff. This is him talking to people. And, you know, I think one thing we wondered, you go back several months to the beginning of the college football season, even the offseason, we wondered how risky this draft would feel once we got to the draft. And now we're here, and the two best offensive linemen in the draft didn't play last year. The best receiver in the draft, I think most people think Jamar Chase, number 2 on DJ's board, didn't play last year. He also opted out. It feels like, do you feel this way? Like as we get closer to the draft, it feels like the draft is kind of, at least the top half of it is feeling a little meatier, feeling good, not feeling like there's a bunch of unknowns. Does it feels like it's crystallizing.
Well, I think with the opt-outs, when you were an elite guy, was not going to phase you. So the opt-out, when you read Penei Sewell has opted out, Jamar Chase has opted out, right? Remember, before we even, I think, knew the season was happening or there was a lot of uncertainty with some of those programs. I guess the SEC never flinched. But with Penei, we didn't know if Oregon was going to – it didn't phase them. Like everyone's like, yeah, who cares? Those guys were elite. And stuff like that, good, bad, indifferent, never phases the top 1%. And that's, right, to me, Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase. You know when you read – Trevor Lawrence had his pro day, and I saw someone – might have been Michael Lombardi, you know, someone around NFL circles said, I had someone tell me the way they describe Trevor Lawrence's workout is he's a number 1 pick in any draft. You go to Penei Sewell's workout or you watch him on film, you go, he's a top flight tackle, Jamar Chase too, or top flight wide receiver in any draft. Those guys are unfazed whether they play a season or not. Jalen Waddle shattered his leg. No one gives a shit. To me, this draft, and especially with the Niners, is defined on like, Zach Wilson kind of came out of nowhere. Jamar Chase, Justin Fields, did he really change a lot? Zach, I can't even say these fucking guys' names. Trey Lance, he was kind of unique because he is one guy that is a polarizing player for sure. But I'd say most of these names that I'm reading feel that they were.
But he only played one game this year, keep in mind, and it wasn't really that impressive, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying like he probably would have been polarized, smaller school guy, non-Division I. D1 AA. Even if he had played the full season, I do think he would have been picked apart a little bit. But all these other names, like the Penn State guy, I think he had opted out. Micah Parsons,
the linebacker.
I mean, it's just he was viewed as a top 10 player based on previous year's film. Now, I think this is if you and I were running a draft meeting. Let's say you're Kyle and I'm John. I go, we're Mayock and Gruden. And you go, no, John, we're not taking a bad character guy again. No, please, for the love of God.
Are you Mayock or are you?
I was Mayock.
You're
there.
Mayock, yeah.
Yeah. So the one thing you always say is a great player, he could have a bad season and maybe you nitpick him. That is, you never knew like it was gonna be like the one thing you'd say with Devontae Smith or Kyle Pitts. They played this year and they kicked ass, so you feel pretty good about where they're at right now. Like the Trey Lance thing, like could he have just been a disaster? Like could he have been a one-year wonder? Because you would just bring up, and I'm not saying this is fair because I saw something Instagrammed on my timeline of Trey Lance, no shirt. It looked like working out with that George, whatever his name is, that's on ESPN, the quarterback guru. And it was like, damn, that guy looks pretty big and physical. Like that guy looks the part. But remember Christian Hackenberg, and I think we did this with Josh Rosen, like after their freshman years. Now those are true pocket quarterbacks, different. Like an athlete's going to look good. But it was like the guy you're looking at, the number 1 pick. Everyone tweeted it, and you didn't even feel dumb. You could have told your buddies, like, I think this guy's going to be we say it about DJ Ungalea. But what if his –
Louis Ungalea.
Oh, yeah, I'm just DJ. But what if he's just not good the next couple of years and Clemson's like 8-4, 9-3 based on what they've been? All of a sudden you'd be like, what is going on? Right. You just never know. I mean, the hardest part about being a great player, the hardest part about being good at anything, I'd say, is doing it over and over and over. Like part of what makes Brady or Rodgers, like they just every year, it's like now Mahomes, right?
That's why
like
diets
Josh
are
Allen,
hard, John. Consistency is the hard part.
Well, I'd say that's the most impressive part about Brady is how just dead set he is now the last like 3 or 4 years on this thing he's doing that like and it's clear he doesn't flinch off the TB12 stuff. It's like, God, how does a guy never break from it? But people understand when you have a bad game. I think when you have a bad season, that gets put in the scouting community, like gets talked about and gets, I would say, dissected. Where the opt-out guys, they just and they avoided injury, right? Sometimes, a lot of times, a guy can fall because of a devastating injury. So those guys those guys are healthy, you know.
Yeah,
so
and
just
a bad
in that
season,
alone,
was it one of your 3 seasons was bad, or one of your 2 seasons was bad, or one of your 4 seasons was bad? Right? How much other data do we have on you?
For the most part, when we're talking top 15 players, unless they're a major projection, you're like this guy, like a Ziggy Ansah or something. For the most part, their entire career, at least a couple straight years, should have been of ass kicking, right? When you're talking about like a top 15 pick. Once you get late first round, second, third, your options become more limited. But when I'm reading these names of Michael Parsons, Penei Sewell, Devontae Smith, the Northwestern Slater, Jalen Waddle, Caleb Fairley, the sweet corner from Virginia Tech, and they always have sweet corners. Zach Wilson, I'd say he's kind of the outlier in this group of like he kind of came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Trevor Lawrence, not out of nowhere, So that's why is this guy coming out of nowhere? That's where you nitpick him. That's, I think, for the Niners when we talk about the quarterbacks, Justin Fields did not come out of nowhere. He played his best football, I'd say, this year, but he's been on the radar, and that's part of being. It's weird because I remember being in these meetings, still talking to friends now. It's a big deal when you're a 5-star guy. When you go to your GM and the guy's being talked about and you're drafting in the top 15, this guy was the number 1 recruit. But or a top 10 recruit or just one of the biggest recruits in the country. But that's not everything. Like that was Mario Edwards Jr. once upon a time. Went to Florida State, one of the biggest recruits in the country. And he kind of underachieved. And remember, he still got drafted in like pretty high in the second round. So it does hold weight, but it doubles down when you're like Jadeveon Clowney or Lawrence or Julio Jones. You're like, this guy was the number 1 pick in the draft or the number 1 recruit, and then he dominated. You're like, well, yeah, just fucking ride Secretariat, right?
Yeah, some element of this.
I'd say really Trevor Lawrence is just, that's why I think people view him as basically the perfect. He's the number 1 player, went to college, dominated. Like it's a no-brainer. Right. Everyone else, maybe Jamar Chase, a little bit of that, and some of the Alabama wide receivers. Like those guys are blue chippers. They kicked ass. Like even if Ruggs, who we kind of nitpick, like it's clear, like he belongs, right? Like when we nitpicked, who was the Washington kid that went to Cincinnati that's not any good? John Ross.
Yeah.
To me, him and Ruggs immediately have nothing in common. Like I could just look at it and be like, yeah, I think Ruggs has got a chance, right?
Yeah. But I think to your point on Fields, your point on Mario Edwards and Justin Fields, some of what we're talking about is the safety of it all. And when you are Trevor Lawrence and you come in, it's like this guy's going to be a number 1 pick in 3 years. And then after 1 year, it's like, yep, still going to be a number 1 pick because he won the national championship as a true freshman. And after 2 years, it's like, going to be a number 1 pick. Can he win the Heisman? Can he win the national championship again this year? You've been in the room, but I just knowing humans, there is some element to all of that makes it feel a little safer, that reduces the amount of criticism when he came in as a 5-star, he was a star as a freshman, he was a star as a sophomore, he was a star as a junior. Who's going to criticize you for taking that guy number 1? Nobody.
Why just went
That's why like the Mitchell Trubisky pick was crazy. It's like,
I know.
Who? And everyone thought, not everyone, but a lot of people, Mayock had him as his number 1 quarterback. It was not an uncommon thought.
You know what's funny is I just went to I typed in Justin Fields rivals, and his rivals page come up. He was the number 2 player in the country. I wonder who the number 1 player in the country was. It was Trevor Lawrence. That they came out in the same class. Like you said, Trevor has no blemishes. I mean, we can nitpick like against pressure, little football stuff, but it's like elite. Fields is like, well, he went to Georgia, and whether it was Kirby Smart's fault or not, like he left, Like, he's got questions. And then I go a couple spots down, and this is like, oh, I feel pretty good this guy's going to be a star, as the Parsons kid. Was the 7th or the 6th overall player. Went to Penn State. Franklin's killing it in recruiting, dominates. So it's like Trevor Lawrence, Micah Parsons. I bet both those guys are probably Pro Bowlers.
Well,
Justin does like have a lot going for him, but I do think there are just holes, and this is why we talk about him nonstop. Where really, when we bring up Josh Allen, like, he doesn't really have that much in common with Josh Allen besides like physical attributes, in terms of nobody wanted Josh Allen. Josh Allen's story really read more for us California Valley people, kind of like Kaepernick's, right? Couldn't find a home, was this raw product. Obviously, Josh went much higher in the draft, but just similar,
unlike,
crazy physical traits.
But he had to go to a junior college first.
Yeah, nobody wanted him. It was wild. Where it's like, Justin, when he was transferring from Georgia and he just said, I'm open to anyone, like, what teams would not have been interested in America?
Well, we know the answer.
Would there have been one?
The number one. He went to Ohio State. So maybe somebody who had another guy, right? Alabama.
Well, I'd say Clemson, Bama probably wouldn't have had a spot for him. But other than that, like.
Well, they would have had a spot if he was cool, like sitting for 2 years.
Yeah. Or just competing and not being the starter or whatever, right?
Right. But maybe you don't want to disrupt the dynamic. I'd
say Trevor Lawrence is probably the easiest draft pick, probably even easier than Luck, just because you're like, wait, this guy was the number 1 high school quarterback and the number 1 player in the country. Right? Remember, Luck was like not the biggest recruit. He wasn't a small recruit, but this guy was. I'm talking all positions. Above Parsons, above Patrick Surtain, who's going to get drafted in the first round. Like, Trevor was 1. He was the number 1 high school draft pick, right?
Yeah. Yep. And delivered. Like, that's part of this is by the time you get to the NFL as a number 1 pick, if you were the number 1 recruit, you have already been the number 1 guy and delivered for somebody.
But I feel Fields delivered, right? He won him a playoff game.
He delivered for Ohio State for whatever reason. Maybe, to your point, maybe it was Georgia's fault. Yeah, he delivered too. I mean, if Justin Fields goes 12, that kind of feels like lower than you thought maybe he was going to go at the beginning of the college season, even though at last year's draft, if you had told me Justin Fields was going to go 12 overall in the next year, you'd go, awesome. That's fantastic. Good for him.
I'd say once he transferred to Ohio State and played for a year and then was coming back, obviously he had to come back. He wasn't draft eligible. People thought if he had a big year, he would be the lock. If Trevor was going to go number 1, he was going to be 2, and it would just stay the rivals 1-2. And that didn't quite happen, right, for him. But it wasn't bad, right? It wasn't like a Hackenberg disaster. But it's one of those where he definitely nitpicked enough to like fall out of the top 10. But this is where I wonder, Deshaun was a better player. Thinking back, right, just watching. I remember sitting on my couch for both the game he lost and the game he won, thinking like, God, this fucking kid's an amazing college player, right? Yeah. Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Fields had the one game, but I remember watching him a lot, not thinking like he's an amazing. Like Deshaun was dropped like your jaw hitting the floor going against Alabama, because at that time it's much more normalized now seeing these crazy yardages and scores. I remember then thinking like, God, he's doing this to Saban. Remember, it was like in the mid 40s, just going fucking throwing touchdowns to. And looking back, I mean, they were both NFL teams, right? Like the guys he was throwing to and all the players on his team. But Fields wasn't quite that. But maybe you go, well, this year, Corona was weird, small season, hard to get his rhythm. Trevor, in the South, they never really stopped. They just kept playing. It was really a lot easier to play. This is the other thing you're talking about in draft rooms with Kyle, too. In the ACC and the SEC, Corona did not exist like it did in the North and the West, right? And it didn't exist in the sense of like it didn't halt their playing and their practices, but just like their mindset of like working out. They never stopped. These programs sent people home, right?
Some of them kept working out. Like Cal was actually working out a lot. Some of these programs worked out a lot and just never actually translated to football.
But I'm even talking about like in the summer, like the SEC was never not going to play, right?
Remember Ohio State? I was kind of shocked to find out.
It was a big deal in the Big Ten.
Some of the West Coast guys actually spent a lot of time working out. You didn't quite realize it at the time. Maybe they weren't necessarily at the team facility in the same way. But yeah, anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Publicizing it. But again, but I'm working out on my own, not with the team. Even if that's the case, it's like they had a lot less going for them as a player / as a team than like Trevor Lawrence and Clemson did, right?
Yeah. Now, as it relates to the Niners, this is all good that there's this many good players, that if Justin Fields isn't there, I think we could have a separate conversation about their draft philosophy here in terms of best player available, given the amount of things they're going to need on their roster. But it does seem like even if a quarterback doesn't get pushed down to them, somebody good's going to be available at 12 if they stay there.
I feel like the top 15 is pretty loaded in names. You know, they need DBs. There's countless DBs, multiple corners. Surtain's good. I don't know if he's quite top 15, but the Virginia Tech guy's good. Multiple offensive linemen. They don't need a wide receiver. Like, that's, to me, they're not taking a wide receiver in the first round, right? I think we agree there. But I think easily they could go DB. You can never have enough defensive linemen. I would say the one thing in Kyle's history you'd say he does, and this is the way you typically win in the league, is he likes drafting. If he didn't need a quarterback, I'd be like, they're going line. D or O.
Yep.
Wouldn't you?
I would, but could you draft Micah Parsons and just go, if he's the best player on your board at 12, just take another linebacker?
What if I told you that they got like I'm just going to use this name, like when free agency starts, they sign Trubisky for like 1 year, $2 million or something.
Yeah.
I'd be like, maybe they just roll in with
backup, you're saying?
Yeah, Jimmy and Mitch. You know, it's not ideal, but Mitch is a way better backup than the guys they were rolling out, right? I mean, he's a guy that's won NFL games, like way more physically gifted. I'm just using that as example. You'd be like, well, I do think you could go with another position. You got Josh Rosen as your third practice squad guy. Figure it out from there. If you didn't go quarterback, I still would go quarterback. But if they didn't, I would understand it. Because that would just tell you that Kyle wasn't comfortable with any of these guys. And that's fine. Now, it doesn't mean his evaluation's right. And as we've learned, he's been wrong before. I think this year he gets a pass on the Deshaun and Mahomes. He just kind of does. I don't think he would as necessarily this year if somehow he were to pass on one of those guys, and the guy would be really good.
Right.
That would be a hard one.
No, they're looking for a quarterback.
Yeah, to me, this year would be the one like they evaluated wrong.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's the first time this year that if a quarterback goes behind them and becomes a starter and good pretty quickly, and they're dealing with a Jimmy. I just keep using Mitch. I don't even know the fucking other names, but just because it's hard to think of a guy they're not gonna pay $8 million for a backup, right? You can't have, if Jimmy's back, their backup has to be those type guys like CJ's, right? Because those guys don't make any money.
Kind of, but he also has to be good. It's this weird place they're stuck in.
That's why you need to get a quarterback.
Yeah. I just think
like Mariota's not an option for that. You know, so you start going through the names. You know,
not unless he gets cut and it just doesn't have a lot of options out there.
Yeah.
And cost $3 million if the market's not good.
But even three, like they need $1 million backup.
Yeah, but what they need first and foremost is a guy
if Jimmy's there.
They need an NFL backup is what they need, which they didn't really have last year.
I don't mind Trubisky at like $1 or $2 million.
I don't either, but here's the thing you could argue. You could argue, look, by and large, the job of the backup is to win 2 games. The job of the backup is not to win 8 games. If
Jimmy goes down for a month, it's season's
you're toast.
Yeah.
If he's making 25.
Yeah.
Right.
Any team in the league would be.